Having a recap of the last discussions we had. So we had done five topics. Four ways was the first one, and then for all, then self-withdrawal, culture of Bharat, and meditation, the way. Now, in all these topics, what each one of them, the way Swamiji has addressed it, is to answer these simple questions that we most often we have in our discussions as to what is the direction in which spiritual unfoldment occurs, how does it matter as to what is the attitude or the inherent nature of each of the seeker, and how does this nature of the seeker connect with the path that the seeker might likely take. Now, to say that there is the Upanishads provide us the theoretical framework or the sound philosophical basis of spiritual seeking is a correct interpretation. But along with the sound philosophical basis, the Upanishads also, in a very subtle way, I won't say complicated, but in a subtle way, push through the idea that different personalities or different natures of individuals will beget or will need the proposition of slightly variant paths. To do that, explain that, Swamiji explains the concept of four ways. And in the topic of four ways, he says that people are generally classified with, depending on their personality, either they are emotionally connected with the highest truth or relating themselves with the theistic form of God, etc., or they are logically oriented. And they can be a certain type of people who are of mixed orientation, both emotional, some percentage logical. And there's also a last category of people who, in their emotional side, they are not as well developed, neither are they too well developed in the logical or the intellectual framework or rigorous thought process orientation. So this forms what is called as four natures or four psychological types. That's what Swamiji used to refer to this. So given these four psychological types, there is the methods that are proposed in the scriptures. So for the people who are more pronounced in their emotional personality, it is bhakti. For the people who are more intellectually and logically pronounced in their thought processes, it could be jnana. And for the people who are of the mixed nature, both little bit of emotional, little bit of intellectual, it is the path of karma. And for the people who are a little less on the intellectual, little less on the emotional, would require strict discipline. So it is the path of Hatha Yoga, progressing into Raja Yoga. But interesting bit is that in the next topic Swamiji covers that the goal is the same. The idea of spiritual goal or spiritual perfection for all these paths is the same. Effectively saying that the aim of these paths is to allow us to get integrated in our mind in such a way that there is no reason to say that the emotional and the intellectual mind can be divorced from each other's pursuits. So they are almost integrated as if it is just one coherent mechanism, thought processes that are leading us to the goal. So this integration, Swamiji has explained in many ways, effectively saying the disintegration occurs because of our pronounced emphasis towards fulfillment of desires. So as you keep going in the spiritual path, the pursuit towards fulfillment of desires starts diminishing. So what remains is only the spiritual goal. And the spiritual goal is actually quite similar to the other desires in the world, but being of a very subtle nature. That means it is not object oriented. All the other desires are to gain something. The spiritual goal is to let go of our raga and dvesha, or attachments and aversions, and get connected to the source. So that desire is given a term in spiritual language as mumukshutva, burning desire for liberation. So the word burning desire for liberation has the same connotation as, let us say, burning desire for property, burning desire for wealth. All these are regular desires in human life which will arise from raga and dvesha. But for spiritual seeking, mumukshutva is subtle, because there is nothing that can be gained by which it can be quenched. That which is gained by which mumukshutva reaches its fulfillment is effectively losing one's the identification that we have towards raga and dvesha, losing one's identification towards individual egoistic self. So that is how for all is the topic that Swamiji covers, as to saying the goal is the same, paths may be different, people's attitudes may be different. In the next topic, self-withdrawal, Swamiji is discussing how in these paths of these seeking the Lord, the highest goal, seeking the goal of perfection, what is the relevance of this idea of self-withdrawal, which is referred to as pratyahar. And in this idea of self-withdrawal and pratyahar, you have to also remember that Swamiji, and this is how it's very interesting, that how the Bhagavad Gita brings together all the different schools in one place in the same 18 chapters, as well as the Upanishads also permit this kind of a confluence. So the words that are used here, like pratyahar, dhyana, dharana, samadhi, these come from the Ashtanga path, or the eightfold seeking mentioned by Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So they don't strictly belong to, let us say, Uttar-Mimamsa or other schools which are very logical and systematic treatment of removal of the bindings and bondages that arise from egoistic perception of the self. So this idea of self-withdrawal, which is pratyahar, comes from that Ashtanga method. And Swamiji discusses it, saying that it is essentially such that spiritual aspirants can conserve their mental energies such that they can direct it towards the spiritual seeking. And this conservation of mental energies and direction towards spiritual seeking isn't very strange to the human mind. It is a very natural understanding of the human mind. So to say that it is alien is not true. It is actually very systematic, very easily accepted to the human mind. But when we try to understand it in the light of spiritual seeking, it might appear alien, because this conservation of spiritual energy, mental energies for spiritual seeking has to be away from its constant, continuous pursuits in the world outside. So getting away from the constant, continuous pursuits in the world outside, that appears alien. But the technique that you can conserve and you can redirect is not alien. But this thing that it has to be conserved from its exposure to world and its engagements and then directed towards spiritual, that is alien. So for that you require a little bit of motivation. The motivation will come through Shravan Manan, through reading and reflection and contact with satsang and teachers and such things like that. The moment you do that, the pratyahar happens, then the mind is now prepared or ready for the next higher stage, that is dhyana. So dharana, dhyana, samadhi, these three are considered in as one cohort of actions that are done in spiritual seeking. Swamiji has discussed dhyana here. So this he will further explain and mature it into a greater and deeper understanding in the last topic which we covered last time, meditation, the way. In between, Swamiji has brought out a little bit of a discussion on the culture of Bharat. And why he brings about this discussion of the culture of Bharat is also quite topical, in the sense that all of the world and its the expansion in which the human mind has happened across the world, across populations, is all extroverted. So people all often try to understand how the culture of Bharat is very introverted, spiritual goal seeking. Why didn't the culture of Bharat ever go into this extroverted solutions, etc.? For example, if you take the what you call imperialistic thought process, that is monarchies and kings and aggression and taking and conquering the world, etc., that identification of that mechanism of life has never been the culture of Bharat. So if you go back to traditional ways in which Bharat influenced other civilizations, expanded its cultural influence, etc., it was almost osmosis basis, or you can say natural sharing of best practices kind of way in which it had expanded. So the method of war was never that of the culture of Bharat. So Swamiji discusses this. Trying to bring about peace by war, trying to expand territory by war was never the culture of Bharat. Same thing arises when we say the expansion by concept of socialistic thinking, like Karl Marx or communism, trying to bring about new world order and then thinking that this new world order will bring peace upon society. So this is called the utopian way of social change. That means there will always be a la-la land where everybody is happy and everybody can share and there is no disgruntlement, no war, no strife. All of those experiments that have been done across the world did not succeed. They succeeded for a period of time, in fact, very short period of time, and they descended into almost effectively dictatorship and stifled level of existence, which ultimately exploded, and the collapse of Russian Federation is a distinctive story that comes out of it. So like that, you will see that every mechanism that's available in the world did not succeed in any way. But how did the culture of Bharat succeed? Because its roots are based upon spiritual evolution. Its goal is also spiritual evolution. Its roots are also spiritual evolution. In between the roots of spiritual evolutions, between the roots of ethical and moral life and the goal of final goal of spirituality, there is enough scope for expansion. And in that expansive scope comes prosperity. So it is not that the Indian culture or Indian civilization always remained too spiritual and did not have any cultural explosive behavior or thing like that. It always had that. So when we say wealth, so India was the only civilization that has ruled the world for over 1500 years. So there is no other culture which has done this, and 1500 years is only a indicative to based upon dirt archaeology. That means if people say I have stark and strict evidence based upon artifacts of coins and pottery, that can be shown to be 1500 or 2500 years. But if you come out of dirt archaeology and say there are enough cultural references that it is over 70,000 years old, it is true, because those references are also with reference to other standpoints or other frames of reference. So when we say culture of Bharat and we say the universality of its teaching, and we also say that that is there to stay and it has never been wiped out, that is exactly the basis upon which Swami Chinmayananda's pursuits, or even Swami Vivekananda's pursuits, into saying that Indian culture or the culture of Bharat is here to revive itself and to express itself the way it has expressed for the last so many millennia. So that is again part of that culture of Bharat only. And it's the strength of the country. The meditation and way, the topic, Swamiji gives about the purpose or the goal of bringing about change in our individual personalities. He calls it rehabilitation. So every single individual personality of ours, or each one of us in our own walk of life, need to make this change such that we can resurrect or we can bring back our connectivity to the truth. And what is the meaning of this connectivity to the truth? This connectivity to the truth brings back inner happiness. Now, most often people ask a question: how can one remain happy internally when there is so much of pain, grievance, sadness, suffering outside? Now, the point that people ask this question is there is this natural tendency to believe that one cannot remain in joy and happiness if there is suffering and pain outside. But that is contrary to what actually happens. Contrary to what actually happens is in the entire creation, when you look at minus the human experience, minus the human population and its experience, there is joy all across, and it's all the time available. Just because there is pain, just because there is suffering, the joy is not minused. For example, when you take the bird kingdom, the kingdom of the birds, there is so much of sweet songs that are being sung, so much of music that is present all the time, every morning, in spite of the fact that many birds are losing their nests, many birds are losing their children, and all that of death and destruction seems to exist, yet there is the singing that always exists in parallel. So this understanding that inner rehabilitation brings about, re-establishes inner happiness, and this inner happiness is not because or not cannot sustain itself because there are maladies in the world, suffering in the world, that is totally untrue. Inner happiness is the birthright of every single individual experiencing individuality. Irrespective of all the maladies in the world, including, when we say maladies in the world, we only seem to think outside of oneself. Even if one was themselves apparently suffering, the inner happiness is independent. This has been proved to us time and again by all the Mahatmas who lived, who happened to have extreme grievous types of personal suffering, but remained completely calm and completely aloof from that physical suffering, physical difficulty, and remained almost like saying reveling in their inner quietude, inner happiness. So this has been proven several times. So there's nothing big, there's no revolutionary thought there. It is a very natural, systematic, logical understanding. We can come to that. Then Swamiji discusses how do you practice, what is the practice of meditation. We had some discussion on that, but the more we understand this practice of meditation, since we have done chapter 6, we know very clearly how these steps are there, how one can withdraw from the external world, come inside, rest in the inner relaxed condition, and that inner relaxed condition can then take us deeper into the inner space of the mind. And in the inner space of the mind, how you can let go of individuality and get absorbed in the place from where the origin of awareness arises. So that is how we practice meditation, and the more we practice, the more we get into the final understanding. So that we can leave it at that. We can continue. We'll continue to discuss more about meditation.